Something tells me I'm going to regret making this podcast. Something tells me, Brett, stay away from the Confederate flag issue. Stay away, man. Stay away. But I can't help myself.
He's opinionated.
He's a good feller, I think. Yeah, I like him.
He's unapologetic.
Well, of course, I think he's hot, but, you know.
He's not afraid.
I think this is the best year he's had so far in his career.
He's always real.
Finn believes he's an African leopard and likes to go by his leopard name, which is Shroud. He has strong feline traits and likes to run and hunt.
He is Brett Mason.
Thank you very much. This is Brett Mason, The Brett Mason Show. It's sponsored by Toyota, Dothan Rental Cars, and Home Depot. More saving, more doing. Home Depot. Thanks for listening to The Brett Mason Show and podcast. Whether you found us on Facebook at facebook.com/BrettMason69, or maybe you caught up with us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, using the search term Brett Mason Show, or maybe you found us on YouTube. I'm very glad that you're here today. And as always, a special hello to everyone listening on our custom Android and iOS apps. Now, you can get those in your app stores, whether you're on Apple, iOS, or you're on Android. You just search for the Brett Mason Show. And if you want a really easy way to find how to subscribe to the podcast, get direct links to all of the apps so you don't have to go searching for them, just hit us up at brett-mason.com/connect. That's brett-mason.com/connect. And keep listening to the show. Later, we'll tell you how you can win a Samsung Galaxy Tab 3. So today's show, I'm going to try to be, I'm not going to try to be politically correct, but I'm really going to try hard not to make anybody mad. Because honestly, from what I've seen on Facebook, most people in the South are rabidly pro-Confederate flag. So just let me say up front, I think it's great if Confederate flags fly everywhere. If I drove down the road and every car had a Confederate flag on it, every person driving the car had a Confederate flag tattooed on their bicep, and all the businesses had Confederate flags flying from the parking lot, and everyone had one hanging from the front of their house, I'd be like, that's great. I think that's just awesome. I wouldn't think those people were racist. I wouldn't think they were bigots. I wouldn't think they were extremists. That being said, some of them would be. The law of statistics dictates that that's possible. But I would say probably, by and large, most of those people, at the very minimum, are not racist. Probably most of them are not bigots. It's just Southern people, and that is our flag. I recall when I got my first, I think it was my first car, maybe my second car, whichever car it was, back in the old days, up in the top of the car, up over your head, there was always it was like cardboard with some kind of fuzzy covering over it. I don't think you see that too much today, or it's much different than it was then. But I had a car where all that had kind of rotted or fell out or something. So it kind of was just metal up there, and in the middle you could see the light fixture, how it was attached to the metal. It was really bad. And so I bought the biggest rebel flag you've ever seen, Confederate flag, and affixed it up into the roof of that car. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I loved that. Look, you don't get more redneck than that. So I say that to say this. You will not find a bigger Southern, proud, call me redneck if that makes you happy, whatever. Okay? That being said, I have a little bit different take on the Confederate flag flying over the Capitol building of any state. People are outraged and flying off the deep end about Governor Bentley taking the flag down. Everybody's weighing in on the South Carolina thing. And, it's just making people, as with anything, let me say this, even if you cut yourself on the arm with a knife, anything that heals, there is a painful and an awkward phase that happens before the healing happens. With some things, some conditions, doctors will even tell you that the pain that's happening now is part of the healing process. And that can be where it's physical in your body, or it can be in a relationship between a husband and wife. It can be things that tear a community apart, or it can be things that tear the nation apart. The healing of the United States of America is one of the greatest examples ever. The differences between the North and the South, the Confederacy versus the Union was one of the most painful things in the history of existence, not just our country. Brother fighting brother literally happened. Father fighting son. Those things literally happened. Families were torn apart. There was deep issues that needed to be resolved and addressed. People from the South want to minimize the aspect of slavery. And I think while history is pretty clear that the Civil War, the war between the states, wasn't just about slavery, it was a pretty big component of it. That being said, there were slaves in the northern states too. There was just less resistance there. Less pockets, less resistance. It was just a different thing. But slavery wasn't just limited to the southern states. So let's just be clear about that. And a matter of fact, you had a lot of people from the north defect and become, part of the Southern Revolution. So while it wasn't all about slavery, a pretty good sized component of it was about slavery. So I think it's disingenuous when you try to dismiss that. And I think if you're going to try to love people and you're going to try to heal, I think that it's incumbent upon the people who weren't the most injured, who weren't the most abused, who weren't the most disenfranchised. I think it's incumbent upon that group of people to take the bigger step forward towards healing. And that's just my belief. I think that's biblical. I think it just makes good sense. And so in that regard, I think if you look at your brother, if you're not racist and you're not a bigot, and I haven't seen one person on Facebook go, "Oh, I'm a racist." Everybody's like, "I'm not racist. I'm not bigoted. I just love the flag." So I'm going to go on the assumption that everybody that wants the flag up is not a racist or not a bigot. So if that's the case and you have genuine love for your brother, and you must consider black people your brother. If you don't, I'm sorry, but you're racist. So black men and women are our brothers and sisters. And if you have genuine compassion for them, if you can imagine, and it's hard to imagine, you really can't imagine it. And I've tried to take this further than a guttural reaction, which is what a lot of people do. I've tried to really think this out intellectually with my brain, and from a guttural place from within inside me, from my deepest, innermost being. I've tried to put myself there. And anybody that says all of those decades and decades and decades of slavery and oppression does not continue to affect that race of people even today, if you genuinely believe that, I think you're being disingenuous. It has a psychological, a deep-seated, and a long-running effect on the psyche of that group of people. I mean, let's look at the Jews. The Jews still have this mentality, this psyche about the Holocaust. You can argue whether the Holocaust was worse than slavery or whatever. The Holocaust didn't last nearly as long. I'm not sure in terms of overall numbers what more deaths occurred under slavery. I don't know anything about that. I'm just using it as the best parallel I can think of. So don't think I'm comparing the two in any kind of magnanimous way. It's just right off the top of my head while thinking of a group of people who experienced a long, drawn-out, traumatic oppression. And so it's the best allegory I have at this point. They are, if you know the Jewish culture, Jews still have, that's a part of their psyche. It affects them. It affects them as a people. It affects them as the way they think. It affects them as the way they move forward. Now, they've been very successful. And not to stereotype or try to lump Jews into a category and they're all the same. But for the most part, Jewish people have become very successful, especially in America, but also in Israel and around the world. Not saying they haven't experienced success, la-da-da-da-da. They have. But but slavery is a very painful thought for black people. It's just something you can't understand. I'm trying to understand it. I can't, because my race is the race that enslaved their race. Now, I didn't enslave any of them. My parents didn't. My grandparents didn't. I don't think my great-grandparents did. I'm going past that. I just really don't know. I can't say one way or the other about that. I don't know. I know that the perception that everybody in the South had slaves is a far-fetched and preposterous notion. It was mostly rich people, richer families that owned slaves. And if you look at how my immediate ancestors were raised, the ones that I know and have knowledge of, they were out in cotton fields picking cotton too. Granted, they weren't slaves. They were poor. They lived off of what chicken they could kill this week and, what they could dredge from here and there. But very poor. My great-grandmother, who lived through the Depression, has just had tremendous stories about the time she lived in. And that continued on down until very recently. I guess probably with my mom and dad is probably when, my grandmother and grandfather had made some advances, but were by no means in any kind of a financial situation. They did manage to have a plot of land, and they did manage to have a house on it, which I guess is pretty big for that time. My parents really progressed to where they were okay at some point. When we started out poor, I didn't have indoor plumbing. I didn't have an indoor bathroom. I didn't have an indoor shower, bathtub, running water on the inside until I was 8 years old. So that's in my generation. That's how poor our family was. So my point being that not every white person's ancestors were entitled slave owners. For the most part, by far and in large, most people's ancestors didn't have slaves. It was, wealthy people, plantation owners, and it stretched on out to some degree to what I'm not sure. But I would say, by and large, the majority of people in the South were poor, white farmers, mill workers, whatever. Mostly farmers. Pretty much doing the same labor that the slaves were doing. Again, I'm not comparing the two, because one of those groups of people were free, even though they were doing the same job. The other ones were doing it by force, and they were enslaved. So it's not the same thing. My point is not all Southern people's heritage is ownership of slaves. So you extend that out further to the Civil War, and so it couldn't have all been about slavery. The people who were out there, the by and large number of white folks who were out, working their fingers to the bones in the cotton fields as well, didn't give too much of a hoot about slavery. Now, they might have been racist because that was pretty widespread. Bigoted at the minimum, racist at the maximum, but they didn't own slaves, so they didn't give a hoot about slavery because it didn't affect them. They didn't own slaves, and they would never be rich enough to own slaves. So it was other things. But racism certainly could have been a part of it. But the war was about many more things than that. So, we're going to grant that. But it has been a symbol of racism. There was racism involved in it then. And that it's not all it was about. Of course it was about other things. There was slavery involved in it then. That's not all it was about. It was about many other things. But that was a part of it. And since then, it has evolved to be the banner of racists. Blatant racists. Nazi skinheads, KKK, other racist organizations fly it as their banner. So in some degree, it's been co-opted. It was co-opted by people who were exclusively racist. So in the beginning, the flag, and it wasn't even the original flag of the Confederacy. The original flag of the Confederacy had a blue corner, much like our flag does now, and it started out with 7 stars in a circle, and there was a red bar, white bar, red bar. It was just 3. So it looked very similar to the flag of the United States of America. It only had 3 bars, horizontal bars, red, white, red, and it had the blue square with the circles. And that was the official flag of the Confederacy, and that was the official flag of the Confederacy for like the first 3 or 4 years. The cross with the stars actually was it's a battle flag. It was not a flag of the Confederacy. It was a battle flag. It was carried on a battlefield, I believe it started in South Carolina actually, which is a whole other story that I read up earlier, but I won't get into that. But it morphed again into where the battle flag was actually replaced the blue corner in the top left corner of the flag, which used to be the blue corner with the circle of stars, very similar to the United States of America flag. The battle flag, the square battle flag, moved up into that corner, and then the rest of the flag was white, was the next reincarnation. And then it moved on to another carnation where it was that exact same flag, but it had a vertical right bar on the right-hand side. And then eventually at the very end, the Confederate flag, as we know it today, began being used in a lot of places. Around 1863, I think is the number I'd have to remember. So it wasn't even, for the majority, I guess, of the Confederacy, it wasn't even the flag of the Confederacy. I think that, I just think we need to step back. I think people just need to step back. There was 2 halves to the Civil War. There was 2 halves to that. You had the Southern Confederate Army, you had the Union Army. Tell me where does anybody fly the Union flag? Does it fly anywhere? I'm not aware of it if it does. I've never seen it mentioned. And those people have just a rich heritage as we do. They lost just as many people. Sure, they won, but it was a slaughter for both sides in many, many ways. And so I'm sure there's great pride there as well. But I don't see that flag flying over anybody's capital. And if you want to go back further than that, the original history of the United States, the original colonies, it had its own flag. You don't get much more historic than that. And we don't really fly that flag. And if you want to go back further than that, the original founding of the country, we all came here and we were under British rule, the monarch, and we flew the British flag. That's a part of our history. That is a deep part of our heritage and our history. But we don't fly the British flag anywhere. You don't see it flying over state capitals. You don't see it flying over federal buildings. Because it's history. We've moved on from that. So, I'm sure there's people many people who have a strong cultural identity with the British people who may, for personal reasons, have that particular British flag at that time they might keep in their home or in their yard. Sure, there's historic sites. Matter of fact, I've been up to a few of them. It's been back in school days when we took a trip up to some historic sites up there and where they flew the flag of the original colonies. And there's places, I think, where it's very, very appropriate for the Confederate flag. But I wonder, and I question, it's not whether it flying over a capital means that you're racist. It's not whether it flying over a capital means that you're anti-African American. It's not any of those things. It's just a question of, is there an appropriate reason to fly that flag there? There's not a reason to fly any of our other previous flags in our heritage, our long-rich heritage there. Why this one? And I go back to my original point. At some point, if you genuinely love your brother and you are the person who can reach out and assist with healing, and make no mistake, much healing needs to be done. I don't care how far things have advanced, and things have advanced a lot. It's still not perfect, and probably won't ever be perfect because people are human. But there's still a lot of healing that could be done, and this could be one step towards that. So when Governor Bentley took the flag down, I wasn't affected by that one way or the other. It didn't outrage me. I can see in the climate of today why that's a wise decision, I think. And it doesn't enrage me. One of the greatest symbols of enduring freedom, sacrifice, loss, deep, rich heritage, overcoming adversity, overcoming the issues and the bloody battle that tore our country apart, remending that and becoming to be the greatest nation on the face of the planet. We have a flag that encapsulates all of that really, really well, in my opinion, and it's the flag of the United States of America. It embodies all of our history. It embodies everything that's happened since the Revolutionary War. It embodies the founding philosophies of the country, the brave men and women who died to make this country even exist, and the men and women who have died throughout its history, whether it be in World War I, II, Middle Eastern wars, Korean wars, Vietnam wars, Iraq, Afghanistan, and the Civil War. A lot of blood has been shed for this country. And I think we have a flag that encapsulates all of that, the good and the bad. So for me, that flag is enough. I don't feel like we have to have that flag flying. I never was offended that it was there. I never once thought about the flag there, and I never once said, God, we should take that flag down. That flag, it never occurred to me. That thought has never occurred to me. Not once. But in today, the point we are now, there's a big festering scab. There's a big, huge wound. And I think one of the greatest steps to healing that wound is probably taken if we just remove those from government buildings. We fly them in our yards, we fly them on our vehicles, we fly them at events, you fly them wherever you want. I'm just not really sure that a government institution is a place to fly that flag because it has really nothing, there's no connection there. So, I'm sure that makes me very unpopular, but I hope that I've tried to give a logical reason for why I believe why I do. Hope it doesn't make anybody hate me. I mean, I did another podcast 2 weeks ago where some guy hated me over the silliest thing. He just hated me. Just hated. I had to ban him from my page. But, matter of fact, I became somewhat fearful over it. Over opinions. And this is just my opinion. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying my opinion is the truth. I'm not saying my opinion is the end all. It's just my opinion. And then there's a lot of other people that share my opinion. So it's not just me. But I fully realize that there's many people that share the other opinion. But the thing I would like to leave you with, if you're still listening to the podcast this far in, is this one notion. And this is the notion that I've seen about these statistics. About 60% of people think the flag should stay up. Or 55% or 70%. And it's always a majority. Our founders, in their infinite wisdom, created a system of government where the majority doesn't always win. And that's a good thing. Sometimes it's very hard to stomach that. Sometimes it's very hard to digest that. But our founders, that's why we're not a democracy. The United States of America is not a democracy. We are a republic. In a democracy, the majority rules. And that's all well and good as long as you're in the majority. But our country has always been about the individual. Me, one, I, my liberties, my freedoms, my rights as a unique individual. And so that designed in such a way that if I were the only person in the United States of America that was being come against, but I could present a case and be morally right and convince the right people in the right places, that even though the entire rest of the 300 and something million people living here be opposed to me, the cogs of government could twist in a way to overrule them all in my favor. Me, one person. That's the beauty of our government. That's the beauty of the system of government that our founders invented. It's the most brilliant thing that's ever been invented in the history of the world. The concept of the majority works most of the time, but there is a catch-all in place. There's a mechanism in place that can shut the majority down. And so I think that's what's happened here. You could argue whether appropriate or not, but I would simply say this. It's the mechanism of the brilliant system of government that our founders put together that has made it happen. And so if we respect nothing else, at the very minimum, we should respect that, because that is our country. That's why we are here. That is the very core of our foundation. I am a group of only one. And though the whole country be against me, if my cause is right, and I can convince the correct people that my cause is right, this system of government will step in between me and the other 300 plus million people and protect me. So I hope we come away from this experience, at the very minimum, appreciating the beauty that is our federal government. Whether you are enraged that the flag was taken down, whether you're just angered, whether you're slightly annoyed, or whether you're just confused and like, it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know why the flag had to come down. At least let's take away from this, our great system that works a lot of the time. Granted, not all the time, but it was designed to work well all of the time. And on that note, I'll take a quick break, and coming up, I'll tell you how you can win a Samsung Galaxy Tab 3. How about free stuff? For everybody that hates me for my podcast today, maybe you'll love me because I give away free stuff. I'll tell you how you can win the Samsung Galaxy Tab coming up in a moment.
Intelligence is sexy. This is the Brett Mason Show.
Let me tell you about Courtney and the folks over at the Toyota rental car program. They serve their customers by stocking the latest Toyota models, which guarantees you a superior rental experience. Plus, every Toyota model available with unlimited mileage. That's right, unlimited mileage. Rates for any of the vehicles are competitive with anything you're going to find from any other full-time rental car agency. They're just awesome. I mean, we usually get the Camry, but we've done the Avalon over there. You can get sport utility vehicles. You can get trucks. You need to take care of some business like we do when we go up to UAB. Maybe you want to just test drive a car you're thinking about buying. It's a great way to keep it for a weekend, and it's very affordable for you to do that. Hey, why don't you call over there or email my friend Courtney, tell her you heard about it on the Brett Mason Show, and say, tell me these rates or how I can rent a car. She'd be glad to help you. The number is 794-0741, or email her, Courtney at toyotaofdothan.com, or you can just go to toyotadothan.com and click on the rental car department and learn more.
Download the free Android or iOS app. Search for the Brett Mason Show.
Well, thank you very much. Welcome back into the Brett Mason Show. Time to give instructions how to get points to win the Galaxy Tab 3. It's a beautiful system. It's a point system wherein the person who is the most rabid person, the most active person, who really wants it can win it. So if you go to my Facebook page at facebook.com/BrettMason69, you will scroll down. It should be pinned to the top, but in case for some reason it becomes unpinned, you can scroll down and find it, and find the post that says, I, Brett Mason, am giving away a Samsung Galaxy Tab. This is not a joke. All you got to do is like this photo. Now, you can like the photo. That's number one. That's required. I will only draw a winner, or pick a winner, rather, from people who have liked that photo. That is my basic list. So you could like every other photo I have, every other post I have, share every other post, comment on it. But if you do not like that post, you are not on the list. That's step number one. That's the minimum you have to do, and that'll get you 1 point. Now, if you choose to do other things, it's entirely up to you, but it will be rewarded, and that is in that you could share that post, you could comment on that post. Each action you take will add an additional point to your score. You can also add to your score by doing that on other posts on my page, other posts that are podcasts, other posts that are pictures. If you like them, you get a point. You comment them, you get a point. You share them, you get a point. So like, comment, share. Like, comment, share. The more you do it, the more points you get. The person with the most points at the end of the contest wins. It's just that easy. In case of a tie, we'll do a drawing between the people who tied with the most points. Bam. Official rules are on the website, brett-mason.com, brett-mason.com, if you would like those. Thank you for listening to the podcast today. I hope that I in no way offended anybody. That was not my goal, was not my intention. I tried to prevent my rationality for what's going on in America today. I'm by no means right all the time. In fact, I'm right very seldom. I'll just be honest about it. And I probably won't be right next time we talk either, but I do appreciate you listening to the podcast. It means more to me that you know, and it means more to me that you know that you share it, like it, and tell other people about it. Thank you so much. See ya.
Want to be a guest on the show? Email info@brett-mason.com.